2% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get punked, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in a Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the Hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters gon' move, whatever click you choose.
So let's get right into today's video, and you see the topic: do blacks really have no politics in prison? Now lately I've been seeing a certain content creator put that out there, create that narrative, and I've seen a dude or two in certain comments, you know, basically echoing those thoughts, right? And so I wonder why any individual would put that out when that is 100% false, right? So basically, in a nutshell, what are prison politics? Prison politics basically are unwritten rules, things that a person can and cannot do in prison. Now, of course, each race's politics may be different, but to say that the blacks have no politics, that's extremely crazy, and I believe it's a statement basically coming out of pure hatred, right? Listen, regardless of what I think of another racial group, another racial person, the truth is the truth, and what's false is what's false. I'm never going to intentionally try to smear any person, any organization with something I know in my heart to be false, right? So let me break down a couple of examples, right? One of the very first stories that I told on my prison channel was when I got to Salinas Valley. And I think the name of the video is "When Everybody Knows You're Going to Be Stabbed Except for You." Actually, the very first stabbing that I saw in prison was a black on black stabbing, right? So now, if the blacks had no politics, this individual wouldn't have been stabbed. This individual who was stabbed, actually, I told the story, was stabbed by a member of his own gang, right? The dude who got stabbed was an older dude at that time, you know, at least older to me, probably in his mid 30s, right? The dude who stabbed him was 19 or 20 years old. And it was a cold story because when the dude first got there, the older dude was already there. When me and the guy who stabbed him, we happened to come on the same bus. When we got there, the older guy brought this dude out, you know, a care package, food, tennis shoes, you know, hair grease, things of that nature, to get him situated until his property arrived, right? I've given many examples of politics, right? In prison. Actually, I told another story, and I'm assuming back to that original story that the dude got stabbed because obviously he had done something that was outside of the politics of his collective. I told another story about being in Salinas, in actuality, and I forget what I named the story because, of course, these stories have no quote unquote title. I just make up a title when I'm finished with the story that I feel will be fitting to what I'm talking about, right? But I told another story of an individual, right, who I also happened to be in the Riverside County Jail with right now. He had got caught up in a situation. It was him and a few bloods in Moreno Valley. And while driving down the street one day, they happened to see a young dude, maybe 15, 16 years old. Some type of confrontation ensued, and unfortunately for the young dude, he was shot and killed. It was maybe about 4 or 5 of these dudes caught up in this situation, right? Ultimately, at least one of them started telling and cooperating, right? And I had a friend of mine who I also happened to do a couple of stories about, nothing negative. He happened to see this individual get spit on in the elevator. Another blood had spit in his face when they was coming back from court, going to their court proceedings and stuff because he was telling, right? Fast forward, we get to Salinas Valley, me and this blood who got spit on, right? So we're not there long, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month, not long at all. And word comes out that this blood is telling, actually on the basketball court, somebody calls the blood a snitch. Right now, the dude who called the blood a snitch, though, he happened to be a blood from up north, Northern California, somewhere, some type of way, I guess, in talking to people or whatever, it had came to this blood's attention from up north that the blood from San Diego was telling, right? But now he did not have the paperwork, I don't think, at that time, right? And so the very next day, the blood who he accused of telling came out and stabbed this dude in the head with some type of pin or something of that nature, right? And so basically, the blood who did the stabbing, my celly did see him get spit on in the elevator, right? And so my celly was there for it all, and so it is alleged that he was telling, right? So the dude who made the accusation, what he did was jump the gun. He jumped the gun without paperwork, and he should have waited until he could have got more black and white information on to support what he was saying, right? But so what he done is he pretty much pushed the dude into the corner, because now you have called this dude a rat, right? And so even though this dude may have ratted, does not mean that this dude is 100% against violence. It does not mean that this dude will get cracking, right? And so what you pretty much did is you have forced this dude into a corner now. You have pretty much put this dude in a corner, and so now this dude is either gonna have to roll up or do what he done, right? And so my whole point of saying that is, if the blacks had no politics, if it was okay for this dude to be a rat, then he would have just stayed on the yard. The other dude who had got stabbed by his homie, he would have stayed on the yard, right? And so, like I said, once again, for people to put out such accusations, especially if they have never ran with a certain collective, is crazy, right? I have seen thousands of instances, right, where dudes have ran aside the politics of their car, and they got either stabbed up off the yard or boo-bopped at the yard. Right now, this was on a level 4 180. I told a story of being on a level 2. There happened to be an individual who functioned with our car, the Inland Empire car, the deaf dude. The name of the story is we know you're deaf and we don't care, or he was deaf and we don't care, or something of that nature. Now, this dude liked to place the male organ in his mouth, right? And now when I got there, dudes who had been in other prisons with him, was saying that this dude was fond of putting the male organ on his palate, right? And so of course, right, eventually some dudes come say something to me. But my whole take on the situation was this right here, right? Why don't you guys handle the situation? I mean, I'm just pulling up. If that's what you guys claim this dude is doing, you should handle the situation, right? Because currently at that moment, he hadn't done anything, right? Dudes were just making this allegation, right? So I went and tried to have a talk with him. Of course, he was deaf, so I went and spent a long time actually, writing stuff on a piece of paper, telling him that, hey man, you are being accused of this. And so whatever you're doing to make people think you're doing this, you better stop, And he said, they lie. He took the paper from me. They lie. That's what he was saying. Like, these dudes is lying. I said, okay, man. Well, listen, Derek, his name was Derek, right? I said, and I was right back and forth, man. If these dudes, if you're doing this, you're going to get in trouble, right? Because from what I gathered, due to him being deaf and different, he had a keen sense of trying to fit in, and I told the story. And so he would always, do extras, he want to come around, and he wasn't a gang member, but he want to come around the gang members hanging out, drinking coffee, smoking weed, so on and so forth. He didn't dress or look any different, right? So you just couldn't tell from his outward appearance, right? But he make burritos and see somebody eating, you know, he get a piece of the burrito. He wanted to feel included, right? Smoke cigarettes and stuff behind people. So he wasn't whooped because he was attracted to people of the same sex. That wasn't the main reason. Eventually, I had told some homies to go get him, right? He was whooped because he lied. He didn't, obviously, had he told people that was his preference, then you wouldn't have had people drinking behind this dude, letting this dude, take a hit of a cigarette, so on and so forth, letting this dude eat out their bowl. So, due to his deception, is the reason that he was whooped on, right? I remember when I first told that story, not a lot, but I got some flack in the comments from certain people here and there, right? But they was failing to realize that prison is a different beast. And once again, once you are deceitful about who you actually are, and you're running around, drinking out of people's bowls and cups and all that stuff, everybody's not going to be happy about that, man. But my whole point of that was politics right there. That was politics. You did something that was not permitted, and so you was whooped off the yard, right? Everybody may handle things differently. Maybe in another organization or under another structure, he possibly may have been stabbed, right? But still in all, the standards of your politics are different from the next man's politics at times, right? And it's been numerous of times I've seen numerous of things, right? And it's crazy because for an individual to say something like that, knowing it's false, right? When you have an individual say, "Hey, man, the blacks have so many different organizations that when I had to go talk to them, especially the Crips, I had to go talk to 5-6 people. But if the blacks have no politics, what are you going around talking to different Crips for in terms of whatever is going on that specific yard at the time?" So sometimes, I guess people will tend to favor certain content creators and may want to run with the narrative that they put out there, right? Another situation, man, I told a story of being on the level 3 yard in Ironwood C yard when you happen to have a dude go to the program office for a 115 hearing. While he was waiting to go see the lieutenant about his hearing, he claimed that he heard another dude in a room in there telling the dude who didn't gangbang, right? So he came back to the yard with that situation, and eventually the homie Chances was pressing on the dude who they claimed, the non-affiliate who the dude claimed he heard telling. He was saying, "Hey man, this dude has just called you a snitch." That is the lowest thing in prison, right? One rung below a child molester, man. So you have to go handle your business. And we started calling the dude Straw Hat because he used to wear a straw hat, right? So eventually, when the dude who originally claimed he heard Straw Hat telling, he went approach Straw Hat. Straw Hat knocked him out right there on the yard. The dude had a knife in his shoe and everything. So now when they wake the dude up, the dude, when they search him, he has a knife in his shoe. He catches a shoe for having a knife, and he got knocked out on the yard and so on and so forth. But my whole point of none of that ever would have happened if blacks didn't have any politics, right? If blacks were allowed to just do whatever, then it wouldn't have been an issue that this individual was on the yard telling, right? So once again, to create a narrative that is untrue only comes from one place. It only must come from one place. Why would a person intentionally spread a lie about another individual, right? So like I said, man, I have seen countless situations. I told another story about the homie Chances knocking somebody out on the yard from our car, right? So if there was no politics, none of that ever would have occurred, right? And there was an individual who I had mentioned in a story, right? And I just referred to him as S. S wasn't for snitch. S was for the first initial of his name, which happened to be with the S, right? And so the dude we was in the county jail, and I had told him some information in regards to my case because he was another older individual at the time. And he by him had already gone to prison and being in prison before, I wanted to get his advice on my situation when I was initially arrested for my charges, right? Long story short, the information that I shared with this dude, he in turn wrote the DA, the district attorney, saying, "Hey man, I know information about, this case, these attempted murders and this murder, and I would like to come to court and testify against Chill if I can get some time reduced." Well, of course, the DA, he accepted all that. Dude came and testified on me, right? So, of course, when I'm going, to certain prisons, I'm showing his homeboys the paperwork, right? Now, when I'm at CMC East, I happen to land in the cell with one of this dude's homeboys. Uh, I produce the paperwork to that dude, right? There happened to be another dude with the exact same name from his hood on another yard, but it wasn't him, right? But this dude said, "Oh man, I'm going to get my homie. We supposed to go get on this dude right now. We supposed to go handle our business." I said, "Well, hold on, wait, homie. I've heard there are two dudes from your hood with that name. One is his one dude, the dude who he was supposed to go get on. That was his nickname. This other dude, it was his last name, so it wasn't a nickname. So I said, I don't think that's the same one, right? So he checked, and it wasn't, right? But now this is during the time we had cell phones and all that type of stuff, right? I happen to have a cell phone. That's the main reason I moved the dude in the cell with me, because I had been around him. I knew he was solid and I could trust him. He was a trustworthy individual. I just didn't want anybody in the cell with me when I had a cell phone, right? And so, in the course of him, being on the phone, calling his hood and this and that, up pops a dude who's, all of a sudden he didn't got out of prison. He's running around acting tough. He had Actually, the dude was talking to a dude who had just been up there, right? So he telling the dude's name. Lo and behold, it is the dude who has got up on the stand and told on me. So he made copies of the paperwork, sent the paperwork to the streets, and the next time the dude popped up, they popped on the dude. Now the dude was lucky to get away with his life, but they popped on the dude, right? And I put this story out there because only maybe a year or two ago, just I have a just we'll just say it like this, right? He passed away. Somebody had looked up and seen, and his actual funeral service is actually, one of his family members recorded it. His funeral service is actually on YouTube, right? And so from prison, from CMC, his homie put the word, sent the paperwork out there, and when the dude pulled back up in the hood, they popped on him. He was hit. He just fortunately lived on and never came back to the hood again, right? And I only put that story out there now because the dude has passed away, right? And I still never revealed his name, because at this point, I'm really not on that type of time. It doesn't matter to me, right? So I never put the dude's name out there, right? I'd done the time he told. Life goes on. Or if I had chose to get out with all those negative thoughts, negative ways of thinking, which of course led to negative actions, I would send myself right back to the penitentiary. So like I said, I came out with a new way of thinking, right? And so once again, just to make false and slanderous accusations, I don't understand, especially considering, a person who has never, pushed with a certain car, and that's one of the main reasons, not one of the main reasons, but possibly maybe so, right? Why I do watch other channels who talk about prison, because I have honestly learned more from watching these YouTube channels when other individuals from other collectives or races are talking about prison. I've learned more watching their channel than I did actually doing time, because when something happens with another car, right? Let's just say something jumps off with the whites, and I'm cool with a white dude. I'm not just to go over there and say, "Hey man, what happened? Why'd you guys just get Billy Bob?" or none of that type of stuff, right? It just don't happen. Now, the only time that situation may have happened, and actually has happened, right, is with the blacks and the Asians. You know, the blacks and the Asians are pretty tight, pretty close, you know, in some certain situations, right? And I have had Asian homies who I consider homies. I've had a good Asian partner who has came to my house here. You know, he knows where I live when most of my homies don't even know where I live, right? And he's popped up and visited me a couple of times. There were situations that happened, and I slide up to him. I say, "Hey, homie, what happened?" But we was on that type of time. We was cool like that, right? So it just all depends. But for the most part, um, situations won't happen. I mean, in terms of, you'll go ask another race, why did they just do what they did. When stuff is getting ready to happen, they may come give your car or your race a heads up, like, hey man, we're getting ready to get handle some business today on the yard or whatever, just to give you guys a heads up, so you may not want to be out with any type of contraband or whatever, right? It's just a heads up. Also, so something won't happen, and some of your homies may think it involves them. They run down there, and it turns into a bigger situation, right? But that's the most you're gonna get, So I would never come on here and try to say too much about any type of organization that I didn't function under, even if it was another black or another Crip organization, a blood or a Crip organization, right? I've seen many dudes, man, who were black, ran off the yard, beat, whooped, and stabbed because they had telling allegations on them, right? Or they done something on the yard that was against the politics of their specific car or what area, whoever they function with, man. So that's the answer. And of course, you'll still have individuals who will still go on to say, blacks have no politics, man. I don't know if you guys pay attention to some of these stories that's going on right now, that Damian Porter puts up. He's talking about blacks being stabbed in prison right now, being ran off the yard right now. We're hearing this all the time, B. Brazy talks about stories like this all the time, So I don't know what what I guess content creators who you guys are listening to, for the individuals who repeat this type of thing, man. But anyway, there it is there, man. Believe it or not, blacks do have politics, man. You already know what it is. It's your boy 16 to Life. Resume normal program.